In radio, especially in New York City, has had more of an impact on those who work with them, or for those of us who are in the business of radio broadcasting, than Frankie, the Chief Rocker Crocker. Tonight we've put together something that we hope is a fitting tribute to his life, to his legacy, to his memory, to all that he's meant for radio here in the biggest city in the world, New York City. He himself at times was larger than life. He was a pioneer. He was someone who was always on the cutting edge, always ready to take a chance, to do something unique, to do something different, to step out, beyond the norm and make something happen, as we would say today. Tonight we've put together his final broadcast. Now, he's been here at KISS FM for the past year and a half with a show called Taking Care of Business, which started this year. Last year, it was the Classic Soul Countdown, and it really is a great show. It's syndicated all throughout the country. We've had it here in New York City for the past year and a half. This is one you definitely want to get out your tape recorders, pop a little cassette in the machine. You want to tape this. You definitely want to get this. If you have access to a computer, you can tape it right now. Pull out a CD, just put it on record and let it go. For the next 2 hours, you're going to hear the legend Frankie Crocker's final live broadcast, Taking Care of Business. Right after that, we've got a special show at 10 o'clock for you, The Life of Frankie Crocker. You're going to hear from, it's going to be hosted by our own Bob Slade. You're going to hear from countless people. We're going to talk about Frankie Crocker, the life, the man himself. You're going to hear some great excerpts. And just to give you a feel of what Frankie was all about. A true pioneer, a legend. He was definitely someone who I idolized, and I think everyone in radio in New York City at one time or another has idolized the Chief Rocker, Frankie Crocker. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to meet him up close and personal one more time. One last time to hear from the Chief Rocker. On behalf of KISS FM, I'm the Captain, Kevin Wilson. Let's listen to the Chief.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for the astonishing
Frankie Crocker.
Hello, world. I'm Frankie Crocker, and welcome to this week's edition of Taking Care of Business. This week, we take a look at the artists and hits making moves on the charts this week. Otherwise, people who are getting played and getting paid. This is a money show, and we are taking care of business. So let's start the show off with Destiny's Child. Still going strong and looking most good. Huge with their single Jumpin', Jumpin', and they are definitely taking care of business.
Ladies, leave your man at home. The
Clark's R&B hits.
Only on 98.7 KISS FM. KISS FM.
Y2KG.
Whatever you want to do, I'll give it to you. It's all up to you. Whatever you need, want to do it. So you want to do it. So you want to do it. Show me how you move it.
You're listening to the Chief Rocker, Frankie Crocker, and that leaves me with no other choice but to play the greatest music ever made, as in Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff, the founders and forces behind the Philadelphia International Music Label. In fact, this next group is responsible for most of the great music created by Gamble and Huff. Mother, father, sister, and brother were the house band. MFSB, as they were known, performed on the majority of the recording sessions, and as a group, they laid down a couple of hits of their own, like this one. Love is definitely the message.
You told us you wanted to hear the hit. R&B hit. 98.7 KISS FM.
You're listening to Taking Care of Business. I'm Frankie Crocker, and that was Carl Thomas with Summer Rain. When we come back, we'll hear from Joe, Kelly Price, and more when Taking Care of Business continues.
98.7 KISS FM, along with Chrysler,
Alizé Kanye,
and American Airlines, is throwing the year's biggest R&B concert event with the KISS FM R&B Jam, featuring R&B hit superstars Mary J. Blige.
What's up? This is Mary J. Blige, and I'm performing live at the KISS FM R&B Jam December 7th at Madison Square Garden.
The Temptations.
Hi, we're the Temptations, and you'll see us perform live at the KISS FM R&B Jam. It's going to be incredible.
Kelly Price. And now, just added, Destiny's Child. It's Destiny's Child live December 7th at Madison Square Garden for the KISS FM R&B Jam. Don't miss the year's hottest event as Mary J. Blige, The Temptations, Kelly Price, and Destiny's Child all perform live at the KISS FM R&B Jam. Listen all day, every day to KISS FM to win your exclusive tickets. It's the KISS FM R&B Jam. Tickets can be purchased at all Ticketmaster outlets and the Madison Square Garden box office. The KISS FM R&B Jam is brought to you by Chrysler.
New Alizé Cognac, pure excitement, pure cognac from the makers of Alizé.
American Airlines, and presented by New York's #1 station for R&B hits. 98.7 KISS FM. Are your debts threatening your peace of mind? Here are the danger signs. If you borrow from one credit card to pay off another, if you're maxed out on 2 or more cards, if you can only afford to make the minimum monthly payment. But now there's a nonprofit organization that can help you reduce your debt load and get caught up again. It's called AmeriDebt. Call them at 1-800-982-2900. AmeriDebt can help you reduce your monthly payments as much as 50%. They'll negotiate with your creditors for you, eliminating or reducing your interest rates. And they'll consolidate your bills into one lower monthly payment. Even if you're not a homeowner, even if you're way behind, AmeriDebt can help. If you have more than $2,000 in debt, call AmeriDebt now for a free debt consultation. 1-800-982-2900. If you've noticed the debt danger signs, or if you're just tired of worrying about your bills, here's help. Call AmeriDebt now. 1-800-982-2900. Not available in Connecticut.
Spread some love.
Spread some love with the buttery taste of Aunt Jemima Butter-Rich Syrup.
Sweet buttery syrup. The flavor is so right. On pancakes at breakfast, the taste is out of sight. Buttery pop, watch it flow. Pour smooth and slow. Aunt Jemima Butter-Rich, spread some love. Aunt Jemima Butter-Rich, the flavor comes through. For the sweet taste of butter, nothing else will do. Pour it on, spread some love on all the breakfast plates. Aunt Jemima Butter-Rich, they love the way it tastes. Yeah.
For the sweet taste of buttery syrup your family will love.
Aunt Jemima Butter-Rich, spread some love.
There's a battle going on.
There's a battle going on.
To outlaw racial profiling so no one's targeted for the language they speak or the color of their skin. There's a battle going on.
There's a battle going on.
To pass the Hate Crimes Act and strictly enforce civil rights laws until the last barriers of injustice and discrimination fall. There's a battle going on.
There's a battle going on.
To lift our struggling schools with new buildings, more teachers, higher standards, so our children have a future.
There's a battle going on.
And in these battles, the Democratic Party's leading, while the Republicans stand in the way, plotting to roll back the progress we've made under President Clinton. But we can't win if we don't vote. For justice, fairness, and opportunity for our kids. Come on out on November 7th and vote Democratic. The stakes are too high for us to stay home. Paid for by the New York State Democratic Committee.
Are you looking for that someone special? Don't like the pressures of the club scenes? Well, you can relax now. Be yourself and meet somebody new in the best no pressure, no hassle way ever invented. The 98.7 KISS FM Soulmate line. Just call 1-800-6 KISS FM and sign up for free. You simply describe yourself and the kind of person you'd like to meet. Then the system's MatchLink software does the hard part, sorting through thousands of great people to find only the ones who really suit what you say you're looking for. You get to listen to their personal messages, and if you like what you hear, you call them back. No pressures, no hassles, no kidding. You must be 21 or older. Sign up is free. Call the Soulmate line today at 1-800-6-KISS-FM. That's 1-800-6-KISS-FM.
R&B Hits 98.7 KISS FM. A special good evening to you. How you doing? I'm the Captain, Kevin Wilson. And for those of you just joining us, I do want to welcome you to KISS FM's special tribute on the legendary Chief Rocker, Frankie Crocker. We're in the midst of airing his final broadcast, his final show of his nationally syndicated show, Taking Care of Business. Now, right after this is over, and this will be airing from now until 10 o'clock, we have a special tribute from the KISS family right here that will be airing, hosted by our very own Bob Slade, something you definitely don't want to miss. Without further ado, let's get back. It's the Chief Rocker and his final show, Taking Care of Business, on R&B Hits 98.7 KISS FM.
R&B Hits 98.7 KISS FM.
Frankie Crocker.
I'm Frankie Crocker, the Chief Rocker, and we are taking care of business. And according to Joe, he's got the formula for taking care of the ladies. Here's Mr. Joseph Thomas, a.k.a. Just Joe, with Treat Her Like a Lady on Taking Care of Business. Crocker, and that was Toni Braxton with her latest. Well, anyway, we hope you've enjoyed this week's edition of Taking Care of Business. It is researched and produced in New York by Doc Martin and Bill Lee.
Frankie! Thank you, partner!
The executive producer, yours truly, Frankie Crocker. May each of you live as long as you want, and never want as long as you live. May each of you live to be 100, and me 100, but minus a day. So I'll never know that nice people like you have passed away. God bless you until next week. If it's Frankie Crocker, it's taking care of business.
WRKS FM, New York.
Tonight's tribute to Frankie Crocker is sponsored by Furniture Kit, now in Union, New Jersey.
The following is a production of 98.7 KISS FM.
We are 7 acknowledged wonders of the world. You are about to be entertained by the 8th, the young man who has become a legend in his own time. It's the Frankie Crocker Show.
Do it, Frankie. Do it to it.
Suck it to me, mama. Good evening, New York. This is the show that's bound to put more dips in your hips, more cut in your strut, and more glide in your stride. If you don't dig it, you know you've got a hole in your soul. And you don't eat chicken on Sunday. Tall, tan, young, and fly. Anytime you want me, baby, reach out for me. I'm your guy. Just as good to you as it is for you. You get so much with the Frankie Crocker touch. After all, how could you lose with the stuff I use? Tall and tender for the feminine gender. Anytime you want me, you got it. You know, they call me wax paper because I rap on anything. Call me aluminum foil because my rap is so strong. And when it gets good to them, they call me candy paper because the rap is definitely sweet. Sock it to me, mama. But be cool, young girl. Don't let your eyes and your ears get your mind so messed up your heart desires something your body just can't stand. Hello, New York.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 98.7 KISS FM's tribute to the one and only Frankie Crocker. I'm Bob Slade, and it's my honor and privilege on behalf of the KISS family to host this tribute to a giant in our industry, Mr. Frankie Crocker, the Chief Rocker, Frankie Hollywood Crocker, Fast Frankie Crocker. As all of you know, Frankie Crocker died last week at the age of 63. He lived, to be sure, a life that had great impact on people's lives and left an indelible mark on this business we call radio and radio programming. Tonight we're going to take a long look at Frankie Crocker and his career and his impact on you, the radio listener, and how, if I can say this, there will probably be no other one like him in our lifetime. He was a unique person, a complex person, and probably that complexity was the core reason he had so many fans and admirers. Over the next 2 hours, you're going to hear from a variety of people, friends and former colleagues of Frankie, talking about him and his impact on radio. You'll also hear from the man himself as we try to peel back the outer layer of this legend, so to speak, to reveal the real Frankie Crocker to you. So let's get started with this very special tribute to our very own, the world's own, Frankie Crocker. Now, before we roll, the music will feature on the broadcast are songs that Frankie Crocker introduced to New York audiences or helped make very, very successful. The Frankie Crocker legend begins in Buffalo, New York, and Buffalo back then had a history of breeding black broadcasters. Imhotep Gary Bird ought to know he, like Frankie Crocker, was from Buffalo.
The key person in our evolution as far as the long lineup of DJ personalities from Buffalo is Eddie O.J. Eddie O.J. is really the godfather of Buffalo black radio. He is the first black voice that the black community hears coming out of a radio. And his effect was devastating. It would have been powerful regardless, because he was the first black voice, but because of what he brought to the table, the style, the energy, and most of all, the community interaction. O.J. was a community person. You'd hear this engine revving up at the end of his show. It was like a sound effect, and he'd be talking and, thanking folks and who've been listening and so forth and so on. And he'd say, I'll see you, about, 30 minutes, bye, baby. And when he'd say that, his voice would echo, and you'd hear this engine, driving off into the distance. And then, hey, an hour later, you saw him in the community. And you saw him close up, and he had all the elements of style that at that point had become synonymous with the successful black radio personality, which we had never seen. And the effect on all of us, and certainly Frankie being the first among the local black population to enter then the radio field, Frankie saw it close up. And obviously took some pages from the O.J. book in his learning process, which ironically occurred in a very, very quick period of time. When Frankie came in, O.J. was very close to leaving at that point. Sonny Jim Kelsey is the person who came in behind Eddie O.J. and who trained Frankie. And the story that I remember coming in, because Frankie and I went to the same high school, but we're in like different decades. So I knew of Frankie, and I heard him, Frankie Crocker, you're a record rocker. He was coming with that. And I remember that when I came in, Frankie was gone, and I came in '64, so you figure Frankie was only there no more than a year, 2 years at the most. And they said, man, yeah, you remind us of Frankie. And I said, why? He said, he was fast, man. I mean, Frankie learned faster than anybody really pretty much in the history of the station as far as how fast he understood what was going on with radio, to the extent that I remember that the comment, and I filed this away being a young blood, because I was like, yeah, I got to make sure that they don't look at me like this, you know what I'm saying? Because Frankie, the reputation Frankie had was, they said, the guy said, Senator, I created a monster. That was the exact phrase. He said, I created a monster. Because Frankie, in no time, was actually critiquing the people who taught him about what they were doing. And the funniest thing that I heard was that two of the jocks, my mentor Hank Cameron and a couple of the other guys, Sonny Jim and others, who said, and the bad thing is that he's right most of the time.
That monster was on his way to New York City in 1965, but his image was self-manufactured.
One of the aspects of Frankie's story which doesn't get handled often is that Frankie in high school was not like a really like smooth, suave looking kind of guy. I mean, there's yearbook pictures, his ears are, kind of thrust out, howdy doody style. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he had glasses or something, but there was something with the eyes, whatnot. And so he was more like a nerd, if you will, in the photo. But Frankie transformed himself as a DJ. He saw what the concept was about, the persona of the image, the car, the whole piece. So now in Buffalo, we didn't get a lot of that. He was in, he was out, radio-wise. The next thing we know, we're hearing in Buffalo about Frankie Crocker has become the Love Man. And we feel love. What is this Love Man thing? And of course, when I came down to New York in my junior, instead of going to my junior prom, my gift from my grandmother was to go to WWRL. I told her I didn't want the prom outfit. I didn't forget the money and all. Like, just give me the money to get an airline ticket. I want to go to New York. And so I came to New York, went to the station, and man, Crocker walked in the radio station. I was sitting with Rocky G. And when Frankie walked in, I mean, he was decked, you know, head to toe. I mean, leather and, you know, some other stuff on, and had his briefcase and his piece, and sat down and started kicking his rap. And I remember that I was already into rap because I had heard a tape of Jocko, and I was kind of aware that that was the thing that was going on. And when I saw Frankie do his piece, man, it just blew us away. You know, more cut in your strut, more glide in your stride, more dips in your hips, and don't eat chicken on Sunday, often imitated, never duplicated. The eighth wonder of the world, before me there was no, the whole piece. And I'm like, oh man. I go back to New York, to Buffalo, and I kick, you know, my rap up, you know, up in gear, right? And something happened in that moment that made me understand two things. A, the power behind what Frankie was doing, and also an understanding of the relationship between talent and radio, and especially black talent and radio. And that was that I did a rap, my own creation, and it took off. Opened my show with it and closed with another one. Telephones ringing off the hook. I mean, people calling that rap was bad, man, I want to get it. Look. And Jerry B., the late Jerry B., called me and said, he was Pete, he said, hey man, he said, general manager will speak to you. And I go to general manager's office, I'm thinking, hey, I've blown up. I'm about to get a raise and pay, and I'm about to get hooked up, man. This rap thing has put me up on the map. And the guy told me that if I ever did another rap on that radio station, I would not have a job. And now I'm thinking I'm getting a raise. I'm thinking he's about to tell me, hey, the response is so great, you know, we're going to do whatever. And I came out of the meeting, man, stunned. I'm 17 years old, you know. And when I came out and I talked to Jerry, and Jerry said, hey, man, they're afraid. What does that mean? So I started researching and looking across the country. And what I saw, this is middle 60s, was that there was a elimination of personality jocks across the country that was occurring, in black personality jocks. And in effect, it was based on the fact that many of these jocks who came out of what we'll call the Jocko school had their raps and had their whole personality pieces, and they had indeed become bigger than the radio stations.
That's the monster we're talking about. But Frankie moved ahead anyway and created an image for himself in New York City on radio station WWRL. An image so strong that Lawrence High School student Leon Goodman was pulled in. He entered a Be a Disc Jockey for a Day contest at WWRL and won, and couldn't wait to get to the studio.
In those days when we were growing up, you know, Frankie was the disc jockey, not a disc jockey. He was the disc jockey. So I got to tell you how I was dressed to set the stage. And in the late 60s, we used to wear Bly sweaters. So I had on my pink Bly sweater, my pink pants, and my black pink silk socks with pink running through them. So I was clean. But anyway, so I walked in the studio. There were three of us that won, actually. I don't even know what happened to the other two people. It was a guy from Brooklyn, a girl from Brooklyn, and myself. And so when we got there, they... Barbara was the reception. She's still at RL. They told Frankie we were there. So when we came in, Frankie said, he brought us into the studio. He said, who wants to go first? So since I considered myself a gentleman, I said, well, why don't we let the lady go first? And the other guy said, no, I want to go first. So Frankie gave him his few minutes and put the girl on and gave her a few minutes. And I was the last one to go, and he kept me on for like 45 minutes. I was introducing the records, and to this day, I still remember what we were playing. So it was really cool.
No, you okay. What was the first record?
Miriam Makiba's, Pata Pata. And he said, so what are you going to do when you graduate high school? And I said, I'm going to be the next Frankie Crocker. And he said, what happens if you don't make it? I said, well, I'm going to make it. I'm going to be the next Frankie Crocker. And then he said, well, what happens if you don't make it? And that always stuck with me. And I remember, and I know we're going to cut this short, but I remember after I did the show, it's like all the football players and the basketball players, they were all mad because I was suddenly the big man on campus. Not so much that I was at the radio station, but I was at the radio station with Frankie Crocker.
Leon Goodman is now an executive with Sesame Street. Now, Goodman may have been impressed, but as Frankie Crocker tells it, his mother did not like the new Frankie.
My mother really wanted an attorney, and she wanted me to do that. And when I came to New York, it was like on the idea that if I did this, if I didn't make it, then I was to go back to school. And when she finally came to New York to see and hear me, I was doing that, the kind of thing that I'm going to do in the intro. At the time, we had coined the phrase, "Sock it to me, mama," which was later taken by I guess, the media and used on a program, a TV program, and they just turned it down to sock it to me, and I used to do things, and it was very suggestive. It was a double entendre, so to speak, means that it could be risque or it could not, depending upon where the person who listened to it, where their head was at. And obviously, and I guess, unfortunately, my mother took it the wrong way, and she thought it was horrible, and she stopped speaking to me. And that was bad because she said she'd worked so hard to bring me up, and that I would wind up doing something like that. I think it happens with a lot of children and parents when a child wants to do something that he really feels he wants to do, and parents want him to do something else. But I guess later she found out that I was pretty good at what I was going to do, and I was going to have a future in it. And plus that and the mink coat that I bought her for Christmas helped out a little bit. And I remember when I gave her a mink coat, and she'd never had a mink coat before. And I remember I can remember the coat today, a white cerulean mink that I bought her, cerulean mink, I think it was, that I bought her. And when I gave it to her, she looked at me with a little water in her eyes, and she said, "Sock it to me, son." And it was a good Christmas. So, and after that, she's been my #1 booster. And you know, like, I guess you can't say anything to anyone's mother about their child, and that's the kind of mother I have.
By 1968, it was time for Frankie Crocker to spread his wings. In those days, the only black disc jockey on white radio was Chuck Leonard at WABC. Frankie Crocker became the second when he moved to WMCA, the good guy station.
I think, in all honesty, the reason I left was to broaden my scope and about $30,000 more. And that is the truth. I can't tell you. I do this for a living, and I expect to be paid for it. I don't think that I backstep when I'm working hard, and I think that that's the only way we can do it. I left because of that. I thought that at that time, that I was worth more. I have no animosity toward the radio station. I might work with those people again. You never know. We're all in the same business. But at the time, I was just offered a better position and a chance to get in a broader audience and more money, so I did it.
WNCA, you gotta be kidding.
Welcome back to 98.7 KISS FM's tribute to radio legend Frankie Crocker. When WMCA decided to end its format for playing hit records on the radio, Frankie Crocker was out of a job, but not for long. He landed a job as air personality and program director at WLIB-FM. Here's Imhotep Gary Bird.
Frankie came up out of this personality era with an understanding that you had to be an entertainer between the records. And I think that gave him a great edge at the point that he moved into the FM experience, which was the way that it was being played then, as you know, more laid back kind of presentation. So we went from fast Frankie Crocker to the laid back, Frankie Crocker, who ultimately became, of course, Frankie Hollywood Crocker, and the Chief Rocker and Black Satin and all the other personas that he worked with in his imaging. And he was very conscious of these different imaging platforms and phases. Time to change, time to come up with something new, time to ride a new trend. And he very deliberately did those things. And I think that in the case of the point at which he came to WLIB FM, I believe he had something going for him technologically and creatively that was happening in music that gave him, I think, the most dramatic edge. And the way I've put it very simply is, What's Going On is an album that's going to sound great however you hear it. But there is a distinct difference hearing it on AM and hearing it on FM. It was an album that was literally made for FM and for the new sonic capabilities of hearing stereo and whatnot. And you then wound up with a series of album-oriented artists, leading right up and through Stevie and so forth, who were creating music that was taking advantage of these acoustical dimensions that ultimately FM was able to provide at a level that AM could not compete with. And when you added Frankie's own power and persona to that mix, and then an opening up of the, quote, total black experience and sound that began to bring music in from genres that weren't being exposed via, quote-unquote, commercial black radio. It had the makings of something that was going to explode, and it did. Right in front of our eyes, it exploded.
Jungle Fever by Chakakis, a prime example of Frankie Crocker picking the hits. He had this on the air 3 months before the pop stations played it. A total black experience and sound was born. To set up his program, Frankie needed personnel. One of the first hired in October of 1971 was G. Keith Alexander.
I actually started working for Frankie at the very beginning. It was, he had been hired at WLIB-FM. He had just left MCA. And LIB-FM was like had just started playing a little jazz with Ed Williams, and, Ed Williams was there at the time. And Frankie became program director, and he decided that he wanted to change this whole station to something a little bit more total black experience. And a guy named Rocky G, I was at Fordham University at Lincoln Center at the time, and I was on my way to the bank, and I ran into this part-time disc jockey who worked in New Jersey. I can't remember his name right now. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to the bank before it closes." And he said, "Well, why don't you come go with me? I'm going up to a record company." So I said, "Oh, okay." And I went to this record company, and at the time, I was on WHBI. I had a little radio show every Tuesday morning from 5:15 to 5:30. And I gave the man $20 for me to be on the air every Tuesday morning, just long enough for me to say hello, play 3 records, and say goodbye. So when the guy took me up to the record company, he introduced me to this guy named Rocky G, who was a record executive. So I asked Rocky if he'd buy time on my radio show, and not knowing that my radio show really didn't mean anything because it was like, 15 minutes and no one knew of it. And he said, "Sure, kid." He said, "Let me think about it. Let me think about it." So I went in the other room to make a phone call. And I overhear Rocky talking to this part-time disc jockey from New Jersey saying, Frankie Crocker just started a radio station up there, uptown, and he's looking for disc jockeys. And I came running out, and I heard the guy as I'm running out say, "Hey, well, I'd like to be in the big time radio with Frankie." And so as I heard the guy make that statement, I come running out and I said, "Hey, Rocky, I'd like to be in big time radio too." Well, Rocky immediately picked up the telephone. "Hey, Frank, I got this guy here. You're trying to sell sex on the radio. He's a good-looking guy. Why don't you give him a shot?" And Frankie obviously said, "Have him send a tape, because that's the thing you normally do." And Rocky said, "Hey, he doesn't need to send a tape. You didn't have to send me a tape." So then Rocky said, "Okay, all right." Rocky turned around and says, "Frankie Crocker wants you to come up to the radio station at 4 o'clock on Monday and meet him up there." And now this was on a Friday. I was nervous the whole weekend because I had met Frankie in Central Park at a concert he was hosting. It was for Ron Delsner or somebody, but it was a concert in Central Park, and someone introduced me to Frankie and told me to take a picture with him. So I took a Polaroid picture with Frankie, but when I met Frankie was standing there in he looked elegant. He was in a blue blazer with red piping around the blazer with gold buttons, and he had 2 white girls on his arm, and his hair was long. And the guy says, "Frankie, I got this young man here. I'd like for you to meet G. Keith Alexander." And so Frank said, "Hi, how are you?" He said, "Frank, I'd like for you to take a picture with him." So I took this little picture with him, and I kept it. So when I came to the meeting with him on that Monday, I brought the little picture with me. And Frankie, he was late. He had me wait a half hour. I went into the studio with him. He was doing his show then, and he asked me, "So you want to work?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." He said, "Well, I tell you what. You'll start, you'll be my librarian, and you'll take care of all the music." He says, "And when I take off on the weekends, you'll sit in for me." I said, "Well, thank you, Mr. Crocker. Thank you." So I started out as his gopher. I used to go for coffee, go for donuts, go for girls, go for whatever he wanted. I used to walk his dogs. And whenever he came in, his show started at 4 o'clock. Well, he'd come in about either somewhere between 10 minutes to 4 or 10 minutes after 4. That's why that long theme music would play. And I used to have to stand at the door of the studio with his copybook and his albums, the albums that he had picked that he was going to play. I used to have to stand there ready, so when he came through the door, he'd take the book and the albums, and he'd walk into the studio and start his show. So I was there at the beginning. I was there when they went to another recording studio downtown and did the ping pong. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what he was trying to do, and then finally he created that, and then it became such a big hit because no one had ever heard that type of bouncing back and forth between speakers.
Call letters.
Right.
That's the famous WBLS. Remember that? And G. Keith says working for Frankie was like working for Juan Valdez, the demanding one.
I never heard Frankie curse anyone out, but he was very hard to work for. He was a taskmaster. He wanted things to be done perfectly. He wanted you to be prepared all the time. He wanted you to keep the studio clean. He would call me up. I'd be on the air, and he'd call me up some nights. You would think Frankie would be out partying somewhere or whatever. He'd call me up and say, Keith, what was that you just played? Well, Frankie, I just played so-and-so. Okay, he says, well, look here. I'm sitting here with 2 big-leg heifers. I want you to play whatever it was he wanted me to play. And I'd say, oh, okay, Frankie. He says, now, play it now. Okay, all right, Frankie. And I'd play it. He was kind and generous, but yet at the same time, he would really be tough on you. When he got off there at 8 o'clock, I used to ride with him in his Rolls Royce. We'd go to either clubs or to his house. And at his house, he'd program the music. He'd have these flow charts, and we'd have to plot out each song for the time of day and the hour of the day that the jocks would have to play the music. And he was tight on that list. And then after we did that, he'd have company come over, and 1 or 2 young ladies would come through the door, and he said, Keith, now you're going to have to leave now, because these are mine. You know, and I'd always have to go when they came. But he was tough, but he and I got along for the most part.
Frankie Crocker also had to put together an air staff. His morning man back in those days was Ken Spiderweb. Like most of the people Frankie Crocker hired in those days, many were new to radio. Ken Webb was never a morning man, but under Frankie, he became one. And at times, he and Frankie would do battle.
There are a lot of things that that Frankie would irritate me with. I found that a lot of things that I was the kind of person, well, if you tell me something, not to play a certain record or introduce a record a certain way, I would listen to you. And if you didn't do it, well, it was added incentive for me to follow suit. But the most irritating thing was that Frankie would tell me to do things, but he wouldn't do them, okay? But in the long run, the things that he told me to do were beneficial for my development, because I'm an engineer. I was a college professor. I was not a funky disc jockey. I didn't have to work all my life like he did to get to New York. I was born in Brooklyn. I've lived in New York. So I needed some kind of guidance, you know, in being able to word things properly and present the music properly. I knew music. I come from a musical family, so I knew that. But I found it difficult and later appreciated it much later, how important it is that little details are very important. At the time, he was rough on me in the consequences of such things. Like one day he told me that if I didn't get into work on time, which was difficult for me, because I lived 45 miles outside of town, and the weather and everything else was a problem, that he would fire me. So here I am working, going home, setting 3 clocks to wake up on time, making sure I had gas in the car, my keys could be found in the morning. And I found myself working under that kind of pressure. We would have meetings, and sometimes he would use my case as an example in front of others. And for some reason, he would always jump on me about what I wouldn't do. So when somebody goes off on me, I let them go off. You know, it does bother me for a while. I spent a lot of frustrating moments going home, thinking about it. Somewhere down inside, I could see that there was, maybe I did need some correction. I also saw that Frankie was just off his rocker on this one. I was never afraid to give it a day or two and then go back in there one-on-one in a room, just like we're in here, and we say, look, Frankie, you said this, and I take offense to that. That's not my speed. And he would never apologize. He would just listen. He wasn't the kind of guy who said, well, you know, I must have lost a head. I had a bad day. He wouldn't do that. That wasn't his character. But he would say a little something or do something
maybe if I did something right, he would say it, and that was the best I was going to get out of him.
This was, of course, Frankie's show, and he was a perfectionist on the air, and he desired that from others. With Morning Man and Kenny Webb, he added female voices to his roster, not one, but two, Vi Higginson and Lamar Renee. And Vi Higginson talks about how she got to the new radio station, WLIB, WBLS.
Part of the reason that I went to WLIB-FM because I was at a party. And at this party, I overheard some people talking about this new radio station and this young program director who was putting a new format into place. And I had gone to broadcasting school, and I had a tape. And this tape was Vi Higginson with Vibrations for New York. And the whole thing about this tape was that this was going to be for women. It was going to be beauty and fashion, which is where I came out of. I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology, and I had learned a great deal, and I was all anxious to share it with other black women. So I created this tape, a demo tape, and I went up to this radio station at the time that Frankie was on the air from 4 to 8, and I sat in the lobby and said, I'm here to see Frankie Crocker. They went inside and said, there's a lady waiting for you, and he didn't come out. So I waited until his shift was over, and he came out, and he says, what are you doing here? I said, I have a tape I'd like you to listen to. I'd like to do a show for women. He said, you must be crazy. You just walk in here like this, talking about you want me to listen to a tape? Well, I said, I understand you're doing something new. Maybe this is a place you could do it. I said, would you please listen to it? He went inside the studio right then and there. He listened to the tape. He came out, and he said, I'd like to hire you. He hired me on the spot. And I said, hire me for what? He said, I want you to be on the air. I want you to be a disc jockey from 12 to 4. I said, I don't want to be no disc jockey. I don't know how to be a disc jockey. I'm not here to be a disc jockey. I just want to do this show for women. And I have guests, and I have names of people and stuff that I want to do. He said, are you telling me no? You don't want to be a disc jockey? I said, yes, I don't know anything about this. He said, okay, give me your telephone number. I gave him my telephone number. And a couple of days later, I get a telephone call from Dick Novak, who's the general manager of the station, the son of the owner. And he says, I understand that Frankie Crocker heard something on your tape, and I need to talk to you about it. Would you be willing to come and talk to us? I went in, and I sat down, and he says, what do you mean you don't want to be a disc jockey? I said, that's not part of my life plan. I didn't imagine being a disc jockey. So then he said, the show for women. And I have guests, and I have names of people and stuff that I want to do. He said, are you telling me no? You don't want to be a disc jockey? That's not part of my life plan. I didn't imagine being a disc jockey. So then he said, I think you should consider taking this job, and I want you to go home and think about it. You will work 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. You will earn $125 a week. I said, $125 a week? What are you talking about? Anyway, I went home and I talked it over with my sister. I said, listen, this guy's telling me I got to take a job to be on the radio. What do you think about that? She said, listen, if you don't like it, you can always quit. Oh, I said, I never thought about that. I called him up, I said, I'll take the job. And I took the job in a very small studio. It was in the back. It was LIB, AM, and FM. And Frankie was really very persuasive in that regard. He knew that this is something that he wanted. Why? I wasn't sure at the time. And he taught me. I said, I'm scared. He said, what are you scared of? And he said, I'm afraid that maybe the women might not like me. They're not used to hearing a woman on the air. But that didn't happen. That fear did not happen. And as time went by, they gave us cold copy. It was baptismal by fire. You had to do it. But the best part of the gig that I liked was there was all these albums in the room. And you could actually pick up the album and play the cut on the album that you wanted to hear. And that was fabulous for me because you could create a mood. And he allowed you to create, he gave you room to create that mood based on what you felt like hearing that day. And I loved it because it was black. It was the total black experience and sound. I can still hear it say, a different shade of black, gospel. A different shade of black, Latin.
You know, and it was that kind of music, that variety of music that we were able to include in that format. And you learned by doing, and you learned the hard way. I can remember reading news for the first time. Boy, oh boy. But you know, there's nothing like that kind of on-the-job training. And so I will forever be grateful to Frankie Crocker, because one of his strongest points is he could recognize talent. Even talent that maybe you didn't even know you had, and was able to draw that out. So I was very grateful to him. I got a complete education by working with Frankie Crocker.
And from 1971 through 1974, Frankie Crocker and his crew of new disc jockeys started to become the voice of black music in New York. If you didn't hear it on Frankie's show, it wasn't a hit.
The radio is not what leads a community. I think the people are what it is. The radio is like TV. It's only a mirror of what the culture is. I don't have a choice sometimes in playing. I do have a choice. I can not play it, but it would be a bad choice. If a record like Rod Stewart's comes through, I mean, I can't say that because he happens to be white, I'm not going to play it, because a lot of blacks are the ones that like the record. Stevie Wonder is not only liked by black people, he's liked by white as well, so I can't say, hey, you can't listen to this. So I think what will happen with radio and what I'll be doing is, like I said before, I'll just be reflecting what's happening in the community in New York or around the country. If that's what you want to hear and that's what you like, I guess that's what I'll play. I'll try to play the best of that music that I can.
Now, Frankie was also big on recognizing trends. Disco was one of those trends, and Doctor's Orders was one of those records he exposed first.
Hi, honey.
The hit, broken by Frankie Crocker at late 1975, early 1976.
And I think that that has a lot of power in relationship to what we see going on now with so much processing of decision-making matrices to figure out what record to play. Frankie trusted his ears and his instincts. And I think when you look back at that period of time, that really gave him another edge on programmers, because he wasn't waiting for the record to be proven in some other region and to get a bullet or whatever. It was like he gave it his own bullet. He gave it his own stamp. And really, that's very much in connection with the legacy of the great black radio DJs of decades past, who in effect were playing their own music, finding great songs by great artists and promoting them and kicking it on the air as a find, you know, a discovery and so forth. I think Frankie kept that particular aspect alive. And I think it's like, okay, we know we all got 10 fingers, right? So let's just say that hypothetically that a jock has 10 component elements that are a part of what can make him effective in the community. And that one of those has to be selecting great new music, okay? Frankie had a grasp of those tentacles of the DJ at a very high level, and the recognition of the power of being able to hear music and play it before other people as being something that would attract listeners to his radio station. And man, it seems so simple, you know what I mean? It's like, it ain't brain surgery, but it is when everybody else is operating as if they don't have a brain.
But with success comes recognition, and with recognition comes the spotlight. And the spotlight was placed on Frankie and the power of his radio station, perhaps a little too brightly. That story, when our tribute to Frankie Crocker continues here on R&B Hits 98.7 KISS FM.
Are you trapped in your current car with no way out? Is your monthly payment haunting you?
Are you frightened by how much you owe? Now you can end your payment frightmares. At Sanson's, huge Route 1 Auto Mall in Woodbridge, New Jersey. We'll get you out of your old car
and into a brand new or certified pre-owned vehicle today with no money out of your pocket.
And with no credit hassle. 3,000 brand new Toyotas. Nissan, Hyundai, Suzuki's, Lincoln's, Mercury's, Mazdas, plus our huge used car and truck super center.
Slow credit, no problem.
Divorce, bankruptcy, repossession, it doesn't matter. Escape the horror of your car.
And end your payment frightmares. We'll pay off your current lease or loan and get you into a new or pre-owned vehicle today with no money out of your pocket.
Hi, this is Paul Sansone. Come see us today.
It's Sansone's huge Route 1 Auto Mall in Woodbridge, New Jersey. 2 miles north of the Woodbridge Mall, or call 1-800-PRICE-ME. That's 1-800-PRICE-ME.
To qualified buyers.
Are your debts threatening your peace of mind? Here are the danger signs. If you borrow from one credit card to pay off another, if you're maxed out on 2 or more cards, if you can only afford to make the minimum monthly payment. But now there's a nonprofit organization that can help you reduce your debt load and get caught up again. It's called AmeriDebt. Call them at
Enjoyable flight. This is the result of a team effort. A better travel experience for you. That's the strength of being united.
Everyday people, everyday Toyota. Bill Bellamy shares with us the importance of reading.
Hey, I'm Bill Bellamy. When I was growing up, my favorite book was Catcher in the Rye. I really enjoyed this book because you know what? It made me think about life, and reading is important to me because you know what? You need it.
Every day a child should be encouraged to read. Every day a child should be able to dream. The World Literacy Crusade and Toyota, building dreams through literacy. Does anyone not like October? Fall nips the air. There's baseball, there's football. And if you really want to get pumped up, it's time for more savings at your Toyota dealer. Hey, we're talking your choice of savings on such Toyota quality vehicles as Camry and Solara, excluding convertibles. But winter's coming, so who needs a convertible right now anyway? Then there's factory-to-dealer incentives on 4Runner, Toyota's most popular SUV, and low APR financing on those tough Toyota trucks, Tacoma and Tundra. Not to mention great lease rates on the new 2001 Corolla CE. Wow, what a month. And you've still got Halloween to look forward to. But first, head to your Toyota dealer where you'll find real values every day.
Ed Shop's Pink Pussycat Boutique, America's #1 toy store for adults, is having a sale. I can't tell you what's on sale, but you can imagine. The Pink Pussycat Boutique is giving away free adult toys on their website, www.pinkpussycat.com. That's right, the Pink Pussycat has a website and you can get free toys. Just log on, click on the toy you want, and voila, it's on its way. The Pink Pussycat Boutique is located at 167 West 4th Street off 6th Avenue in the Village. Call 212-243-0077 for a free catalog. That's 212-243-0077, or log on to thepinkpussycat.com for a complete line of toys for lovers. Stop by the Pink Pussycat Boutique, and one of their kittens will help you pick out the toy or gift for that special someone in your life. Visit Ed Shop's Pink Pussycat Boutique, 167 West 4th Street off 6th Avenue.
Visit the cat, Ed Sharp's Pink Pussycat Boutique, and make all of your fantasies come true.
Welcome back to our tribute to Frankie Crocker on WRKS FM New York. I'm Bob Slade. In the years 1971 through 1974, WBLS slowly became the station Black New Yorkers turned to. It had news and information, pleasant personalities, and a main attraction during afternoon drive, Frankie Crocker. Now, Frankie was hosting concerts as well, making TV appearances, even appeared in movies like Cleopatra Jones. There, he played himself.
Hey, hold it. Hey, look here, I want you to be here next week because I got a show that's bound to put more dips in your hips, more cut in your strut, and more glide in your stride. If you don't dig it, you know you got a whole in your show.
And the songs, well, Frankie could smell a hit. The Car Wash soundtrack featured the main title, but after Frankie exposed audiences to other songs on the LP, hits like this one emerged for Rolls Royce. Group Enchantment with Gloria, one of the acts that got major airplay here in New York City, courtesy of Frankie Crocker, a new act at that. Kiss FM's Fred Boggs ought to know about those days. He worked for Frankie in the mid-'70s.
I worked BLS 74, 75, 76. It was my first job in radio. As a matter of fact, Johnny Allen was the guy that made the call and told me that Frankie Crocker needed an engineer. They needed an engineer at the station. He didn't say exactly who it was. He didn't say who it was. And I got to the station, and I had to sit around and watch Frankie work with the engineer that was there, Jay Snyder at the time. And they sat me down and showed me how the guy wants to work. And I became his engineer. He would sit in one room, like Trevor Hollywood is right now. He's in one room, and Frankie, I would be in the next. And I would play all the records. He would communicate via the intercom and going back and forth. I mean, it was an incredible experience because I had been listening to this guy most of my life. I mean, I must have been about like in 4th or 5th grade when he came to New York. And he brought a lot of energy to the radio in New York. We would be in the street playing stickball. And Frankie would come on, and like my boy's mother would put the radio in the window. This is before the portable radio thing. Or, you know, you would have the 7 transistor, but you couldn't hear that in the street. And the mother would put it in, he would come on with this is the show that's bound to put more dips in your hips, more cut in your strut, more glide in your stride. If you don't dig it, you know. And it was just a whole other thing that we hadn't heard in New York in a while. And it was just the smoothness and the slickness about it. And we would look forward to that opening, and we would look forward to the closing with the Chambers Brothers and Baby Please Don't Go. and he would have the phones ringing and talking to the fictitious girlfriends. Oh, hey, Stephanie, I'll see you at 10:30. Well, I gotta go home, walk the dog, and oh, hey, Gladys, I'll see you at 10:45. Go and walk the dog. I stopped by, see at 6. And each phone call, there was another chore he had to do that would cause him to get there a little later. But it was just these kind of things that he kind of brought to the kind of radio we listened to, soul radio, where it was a lot of times a lot of guys just talking stuff on the radio. But Frankie kind of brought the theater of the mind to soul radio, black radio at the time, when a young guy like myself could listen to the radio and kind of envision what was how I thought you were envisioning what was going on.
And what was it like working with Frankie?
There was a time we used to play the People's Choice, which was one of the big records, Do It Any Way You Want It. And at the time, the station was located on the 15th floor at 801 2nd Avenue, and we didn't have any carpeting on the floor. It was very poorly insulated. Great facilities, but no insulation. It was basically an office. And what happened while the songs were playing, Frankie's thing was